Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch podcast, where I get to sit down with friends old and new and have honest conversations. Today I welcome a dear friend, Brian Aynardi, to the front porch. Can't wait to get this conversation going. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for coming on.
You got it, Doug. Thanks for having me, my friend.
All right, so I usually start every episode the same way to let our audience kind of get to know you a little bit. Tell us where you were born, where you grew up, and some things about your childhood. Like, did you do sports? Did you have a lot of brothers and sisters? Give us a picture of what Brian was like as a kid.
Well, it depends what Brian was like as a kid we're talking about. When I was younger, I was born in Berks County, Pennsylvania, just outside Reading. I technically lived, I guess, on the Wyomissing side of the line, but I went to Wilson High School or Wilson School District. Before I went there, I was actually a Catholic school kid. I went to St. Ignatius through sixth grade. I was an altar boy, and I played a lot of sports as a kid. Basketball, football, baseball. I think when I was probably around 10 or 11 was kind of when the Tiger Woods craze hit. And we had a family friend that was a golf pro. And at that time, there was this left-handed guy because I hit things left-handed. There was this golfer named Phil Mickelson, and he said, "You got to watch this guy. He's going to be great someday." So that kind of started my love of golf. We also played a lot of street hockey when I was a kid. I got the nickname I think probably a 10 to 12-year-old, got the nickname Commish. Um, Everybody called me the commissioner because this is back before cell phones. So any of your listeners who were living life before we had cell phones and all this kind of technology now might get a kick out of this, but I knew everybody's number in the neighborhood on the old dial-up phone by heart, and I would call their houses. And we actually recruited a bunch of the dads in the neighborhood who were in their, at that time, probably in their late 20s, early 30s. And they played, and this went on through our teenage years, up until my brothers and I went to college. We used to have this thing on Memorial Day. It was like the Memorial Day Cup. We had this cup that one dad put some paint cans together and used some aluminum foil and made this cup, and we'd play for it every year. But I was the commission. I used to set up games. We'd play pretty much every weekend, and it was full contact. I mean, the dads were, so if there's any dads listening to this and the pain in the butt kids in the neighborhood are asking you to play hockey with them, it was good because a lot of those guys ended up being mentors to me, and many I still talk to even to this day. I mean, now we talk about golf or trading stocks or things like that, but it was cool because most of them were either just starting to have kids, but they were young enough that it was good exercise, and they would have a few beverages probably after each game too. But it was pretty intense. I have two brothers. My older brother, Mike, he is just about 2 years older than me. And my younger brother, Jason, is a year and a half younger than me. I was the middle of three boys, which probably leads to some of our discussion later. And we used to spat a little bit, but we were always close to as kids. And a lot of times we would, especially as we got into high school, would kind of run in similar social circles. And my younger brother ended up following me to Penn State for college. And yeah, my parents were great. My dad was an internal medicine physician. My mom was a professor over at Penn State Berks, and I kind of lived the all-American, as my coworkers now joke, the all-American platinum spoon lifestyle growing up as a kid. But my parents did a great job wrangling three boys who had a propensity to not follow everything my mom asked us to do.
Yeah, but overall, it sounds like the community you grew up in was really strong too.
It
So,
was, yeah.
yeah.
And the Wilson school district was great. There was obviously you're a fellow Berks County, and you know that Wilson's always kind of had um, the athletic side has been very big there, but academically, they prepared me very well for everything I faced in undergrad and graduate school, and put me on a good path. Some of the choices I made were maybe not the best
Well,
choices
we'll
for
we'll, we'll talk
my
about
path,
that,
but
but
we'll
let's
talk
let's
about that a
let's
little bit.
transition then. So after high school, you did you go to Penn State right away, or did you
I
take any?
did.
Okay, so what was that like going from Wilson to Penn State? What did you do your undergraduate in?
Well, I don't want to throw any of my friends at Wilson under the bus, so I'll talk carefully here. But we uh, we we probably figured out how college life was a couple of years before college life technically existed for us, and did some fun things on the weekends. But um, I I probably followed a different path than most. I viewed college as an opportunity to go uh, party and have fun and have the time of my life. Uh, I heard all these stories growing up, whether it was my parents, friends, or my dad's roommates who he stayed very close with throughout the years of, everybody, the best years of your life are college, right? And so I didn't take academics as seriously my first couple of years. I had other priorities. I learned the hard way that it was, important to do that. But academically, I mean, even uh, uh, Wilson prepared me very well. I'll just leave it at that. But but yeah, college was good. My first year or two, my grades could have been better. But yeah.
What was your degree in?
So my degree was in turf grass science.
Okay, let's pause right there for anybody listening, because the first time I met Brian and heard Brian's story, I had and I've been to college, but I didn't realize that you could get a degree in turf grass management science. So please explain that degree to anyone that has no idea what we're talking about.
Well, first we have to back up a little bit. Um, when I was in high school, there was a period of time where I didn't really like school. And I remember one time saying to my dad, you know what, I want to quit and do construction or be a stonemason. And he looked at me and he said, okay. He said, well, do you really feel serious about this? And this is some good love from my dad. You'll understand why here in a second. But he said, look, you can make good money being a stonemason. He said, but I'll tell you what, he said, I have a patient who's in that business. He said, I'll talk to him and see if it's okay. And you can go work with him maybe for a week and take a week off of school. And because I always like doing construction type stuff. I got that from my mom, actually, but because she's pretty handy. My dad is not. And he said, "Oh, I'll talk to this guy, and if he's okay with me sharing who he is and what he does, you can go with him for a week." And he said, but I got to tell you, when you meet this guy, he kind of limps around because he's on his knees a lot, laying block. And when you shake his hand, he's like, you better shake it firm because he's got really, really rough cut up hands. He said, and he's got arthritis in his hands too, because he's always working with them. He's like, so, just so you know, it's going to be a really tough week of work. And this guy, he kind of seemed a lot older than he is. And at that point, I realized that my dad was trying to softly, and I said, all right, fine. I won't do this. But so the short story is I was a little lost and about what I wanted to do. And because everybody grows up and says, oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a engineer, right? Make all kinds of good money and whatever. But I didn't know. And I had a business when I was a kid cutting grass. I loved cutting grass from the time I could walk. I mean, our family laughs because there's photos of me pushing around lawnmowers at like the lower bar with my dad and my uncle. My dad at one point took the engine out of a lawnmower when I was a kid so I could push it around. And I would walk in the neighborhood and walk, a mile with a lawnmower to go cut grass. And my mom said, she came home from work one day. She said, look, if you don't know what you want to do, she said, I know this is, she said, you'll never believe this. My new office partner, a guy who I now do research with in my life later here. But she said, "You'll never believe this. He's a turf grass science professor at Penn State, and Penn State has the premier turf program in the world." And to get to your question, turf grass science is the study of it's an agronomic degree. It's a very specific area. Most of the Big Ten schools have programs, or any of the land grant institutions typically have had programs. And then, so Rutgers, Penn State, Michigan State, Ohio State, a few places have had programs decline over years. NC State and Tennessee are other big places. And basically, it's to either become a manager of a golf course, so run the maintenance, because there's actually a lot of science that goes into maintaining turf at a high level, like on a golf course or a professional athletic field, or things like that, down to what type of grasses you're growing, protecting those types of grasses from disease, cultivation practices. In sports, there's this huge thing now where schools want to put in synthetic turf. But there's actually some dangers around synthetic turf, and sometimes the old real stuff works pretty good. You can get heat injury from synthetic turf, a lot of abrasions, with just opening up wounds and then contacting other people with those wounds. There's not many places they can dispose that synthetic turf, and they have to grind in all kinds of things with rubber in order to make it soft enough, like with old used up tire parts, crumb rubber. So that could be considered part of turf science too, but really it's more about being running like learning the business end and the agronomic end to run a landscape company, or to be in charge of the grounds of a golf course or something like that. So that's the very long answer to what is turf grass science.
So if from that little boy pushing a lawnmower all over Wyomissing to getting to Penn State and saying, "Hey, I can actually study this," and I mean, you had to be really. I would think that would have like answered that question of I don't know what I want to do anymore.
Yeah, and I actually that was really cool because Penn State was like the place to go to study this too. Um, and uh, Especially back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And Yeah, it was kind of an outlet. It was like, oh my gosh, now I found something I can really do. And it's not the best pickup line to tell your freshman female colleagues that you're a turfgrass science major, because usually you get a funny look and a pause. And people just assume, oh, so you cut grass for a living. That's really not very much of it at all. But yeah, so it was cool because it jived with what I love doing in life. I loved being outside, um, and I found out quickly that working at a golf course, I loved it. This will probably dovetail into another part of my life, but I was making some poor life decisions and getting up at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning every day to go, drive mowers and things like that. Working on a golf course for a year, it was not everything I'd hoped it would be, but part of that was really my fault. And I worked for a guy who was incredibly knowledgeable and worked on a bare bones budget. But I think sometimes my behavior clashed with what he was looking for. So we'll leave it there for now.
All right. So eventually, we might as well finish this part of the story. Eventually, you would go back. You got your undergraduate, but you would go back and then do grad school as well at Penn State in turf management, grass management as well, correct?
Yeah, correct. So I graduated after some early stuff in college. I ended up graduating a semester early, uh, and I was going to go do a master's in agronomy at UConn. I kind of decided at the time I was just like, I'm just not sure. The last 2 summers of my undergrad, I actually reconnected with my mom's office partner, or was no longer her office partner at the time, and he actually had me work with him for 2 summers in a row doing research. So, evaluating chemicals, tilling up land, doing all kinds of stuff to set up the research facility he was putting together at Penn State Berks. And uh, that's where I was like, oh, maybe I'll go do a master's in this. And I just decided, I don't know. Sometimes when you get out of college, you're not, you get this, oh no, what's next? And I made a poor choice and decided not to. And I drove for UPS for 2 years after that, which I was in much better shape than I am today with that job. But I was glad to get out of there. I ended up going back to Penn State in 2010, and I ended up getting my PhD in plant pathology. I did that specifically in turf, and a lot of my dissertation was much more based on molecular detection of a particular pathogen that's of significant interest in the turf world. But then I also ran my boss's fungicide efficacy spray program. So he kind of got a 2-for-1 cheap labor kind of guy who was both a PhD student for 5 years and a spray technician. But that also gave me an opportunity to interface a lot with people from the development world in pesticides, which got me where I'm at today with my career. So.
Yeah. All right, so let's transition back and loop back around because this is a part of the conversation I really wanted to dig into. You said earlier there were times where you were making some pretty poor choices in life decisions. Let's, if you don't mind, let's go down that road a little bit.
So early on in my, I don't want to say childhood, I don't want to make it sound too bad, but in my teenage years, uh, you know, my friends and I would, after the dances in seventh and eighth grade, we would, somebody would sneak some Swisher Sweet cigars or some Skoal or something like this that they got from one of their brothers or siblings or somebody bought for them. I don't know. We kind of got into trying that stuff and drinking some alcohol. And I loved drinking alcohol. And we had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, it's not like I don't want people to think, in seventh, eighth, 10th grade, we were drinking every day. That's not what it was. But a lot of times on weekends, or if we were going to a soccer game or a football game or whatever, we would, we drink some beers before we went in or drink some hard liquor before we went in. And um, it was not a problem for me at that time. I may or may not have been one of the ringleaders with organizing
Well,
events.
you were the commish.
I was the commission. I've done this my whole life, Doug. I mean, I was a shoe-in for the job. Yeah. So, but there was a thing, and I will say this: if any students you have graduating, and feel free to share this with students even at your school if there are kids that they think that they might be getting into stuff. Um, Most people can have fun and enjoy it. Particularly for me, it was with alcohol. And it for a long time for me, it was fun and there wasn't any issue. But between the end of high school and when I went to college, um, as it was explained to me later, um, in some of us, there's a light switch. Uh, and when you hit that light switch and it stays in the on position, you can't turn it off. Most people can turn it off, but some people it just turns up, and whether it's genetics, um, or now neither of my parents had drinking problems at all, but some other family members and grandparents, there was a little history there. And my mom, to her credit, warned us about that as kids. She was like, "Hey, just so you guys know, there's some genes in the genes, as they said in Berks County, in the family that just be careful." Um, and like somebody else told me, you know, you go to college, a lot of kids go up a hill to that party thing, and most of the kids walk back down when they graduate, and some go up that hill and they just stay on top of the hill and hang out and continue to have fun. And that was me. Um, and so that was kind of, I honestly had a lot of good fun in high school, but there was a change my last year in high school into start of college where it went from fun to a lot of blacking out, and uh, uh, it really affected some of my friendships. It really severely impacted a relationship I was in at the time. And it affected my relationship with my parents. I mean, they never gave up on me, and we can go more into this, but they never gave up on me, and they never, forced me into anything. But I probably wasn't the all-American son. I might have been there for a while, for a couple years with that. Um, so my message to anybody that might be worried that they have an issue if they're in late high school or around colleges, if you find that you can have a couple and it doesn't bother you, then this conversation is pretty relevant to you. If you start drinking a couple drinks and all of a sudden you just can't wait to get the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, get in front of it while you can.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question to you is because there's a lot of people that face addiction problems in our country, whether it's alcohol or tobacco or marijuana or whatever. I mean, we can insert anything here, right? Not everybody
I
can.
started I started smoking cigarettes when I was, and my mom jokes that I was her high risk child. And my dad used to refer to me as the rebel without a cause, because I used to love. I mean, when I turned 18, I would go spend hundreds of dollars, like paychecks, on scratch off tickets. And when I turned 18, I'd smoke 2 packs a day up until 2017. So I had other. It wasn't just alcohol.
Right.
That I just would, I'd pick up things and I'd be all about them. So
Well, I guess my question is, there's a lot of people that suffer from addiction out there, but not every person that has those issues takes the next step to actually go into a program to help them recover. But you did. How did you come to that? Were you pushed into it by family and friends, or did you consciously make that decision yourself?
so that's a great question. And I guess I'll say this, because this could we could talk for 2 days about this. And I don't even know if I've told you some of this before. I had developed an anxiety disorder, um, uh, in high school, and uh, so my mom was a little bit worried about the partying and my dealing with my anxiety disorder when I went to college. And one of the conditions was you need to see somebody up there. And even in my first year of college, my girlfriend at the time told me, like, hey, you need to do something. Most of my male friends were partying right there with me, but they would always be asking me, like, why can't you just, like, why do you have to black out every time you drink? Like, why do you have to? Why can't you just, like, take it back a step? My parents were kind of like, and my dad, I think was trained, and my mom, knowing from her family experience, like, they knew that I was above and beyond the normal college behavior, and we're kind of like, well, maybe you should talk with your therapist about this. And you know and my therapist, who had after I got one underage, actually wrote a letter for me to the judge, or the magistrate, because it was just a summary offense drinking thing, but said basically, this person is supposed to be here for this, but it's rather apparent that the first obstacle they need to figure out is their drinking. And he eventually talked me into. He didn't talk me into. He just kept saying, there's this group called Alcoholics Anonymous. You could go there. If you don't like it's not. But you might find that you have more in common, or you might find people that maybe understand how you feel about your drinking. Because we tried everything before I did that. I mean, it was okay. You can go out tonight. My freshman year, we settled on it can be 12 drinks. It could be 12 beers, 6 shots, and 6 beers, or 12 shots, or 6 glasses of wine. And he wanted me to write this down, um, and I, failed miserably. And uh, so it was him, it was my girlfriend, it was my friends to an extent, that were like, just like, what's going on, man? And my parents too were like, maybe you should just try it out. And I'll never forget this. And I will say this professionally, I don't think most people know that I would consider myself to have been in recovery. But almost everybody I deal with professionally knows that I don't drink and that it's because I didn't do a good job of it earlier in life. My wife has Whitney. She's never seen me drunk. I've been sober since 2010. Now, I did get sober for about a year and a half in college, and I did decide after college that I wanted to try it out again, and I didn't do too well. At first I thought I could stick to beer, and then that didn't work. And then I got back to where I was before. But I didn't go to rehab. I just went to AA meetings, and I remember the first time I went, I sat in that meeting, and I thought, oh man, I went in and it's a lot more professional people than you might think. Um, and I'm thinking they're telling about how they've dealt with stuff and things they deal with, and I'm thinking, my God, I I relate to everything everybody in this room said tonight. But I'm not one of them. I just, that's, and I left the meeting. I actually called my parents. I said, guys, you never believe this. I found a group that understands me, and I think this will scare me into drinking safely. Um, and I got back, and my roommates were having a party that night, and I didn't wait. I waited like 2 hours, and they're like, "You did good, man. You waited 2 hours. You can drink now." And it went into that. So before I go too far into that, go ahead with any additional questions you have.
No,
Um,
keep
but
keep
it
telling your story. Keep telling your story.
and and it was very hard. I think there has been a lot better, um, or a lot more put into recognizing that you don't have to lose every single thing in life. You don't have to lose the two cars in the garage. You don't have to lose your house. You don't have to lose your marriage. You don't have to lose your job. To recognize that maybe alcoholic tendencies or addictive tendencies are probably more obvious around college age years when you get out, than they are necessarily waiting until you're 70 years old and drinking a fifth a day because you got nothing else to do. But there wasn't much of a community of young people. There was 4 or 5 of us that were in our college years, and and we got to be friends, and we kind of bonded over it, and we went and did all the normal stuff. And I remember when I first stopped in college, I was in tears, and I told my mom, I said, I don't know, this my life's over, because that was kind of my identity for a while. I was having fun. And my mom told me, she said, Brian, you can do anything you want in life, but you just can't drink everything. And that's hard to hear as a 20 some early 20s. I think I was 21 at the time. And I'm like, well, she just doesn't get it. I know she loves me and she's trying to support me, but she just doesn't get it. And I'm lucky because my parents both were ardent supporters, and my brothers were ardent supporters of me going to meetings and not drinking. And like I said, after college, I kind of, after I decided not to do grad school, I kind of was like, well, maybe it was a college thing. Everybody has their own journey and makes mistakes, and then I ended up getting to a place again where it wasn't so good. And I luckily had a lot of my friends supported me, and it was tough because, like I said, there wasn't a big recovery community for younger kids like there are at a lot of universities now. Um, but it's even harder than when you're in your mid 20s and you're living at home with your parents, and you have the drinking issue. And um, most women kind of pick up on the fact that you might have a drinking issue, especially when you show up to a cab on a first date. Um, so, in Berks County of all places with a cab. So, I ended up getting to a place again where I needed to stop. And January 1st, 2010 was the day I decided, after a bit of a rampage for a week before that, especially unfortunately on Christmas Day of all days. Um, and I haven't drank since then. And I did utilize the recovery community very heavily my first couple of years. Uh, but as time's gone on, I what my mom said was actually true. And I've had a lot of people professionally say to me, they're like, I admire you. You come out and I'm a development scientist for a chemical company, and so part of my job is entertainment, and taking people out. And most of them know, if not all of them know. And in fact, that my personality, Doug. for a couple of years, some of them would be like, "Oh, aren't you drinking tonight?" And I'm like, my coworkers would look at them and they'd be like, "Well, I mean, come on, you were out with us all night in San Antonio or in Dallas or in, Orlando." And I'm like, I wasn't drinking. And they'd look at my coworkers were like, he's our DD, man. That's the permanent DD right there. And it just goes to show you that my mom was right. So never question your mother. That you can do anything you want in life, including getting a PhD, including having a job where you travel and entertain people. Um, but you just got to make sure you know what the important thing is. And for me, it's just not drinking. But I can do anything else I want, pretty
Well, I
much.
guess my question then is, I mean, and maybe you kind of answered this already, but I want you to kind of chew on it too. There's a lot of people that do go into recovery programs or rehab and it doesn't work for them. So, what do you credit your success to for being able to beat this monster? And maybe you haven't come. I know there's also people say you never beat it. It's like always there on your shoulder or whatever.
The monkey's
Um,
on your back. Yeah.
Right. But what do you think has attributed to your success for being a 13 years sober is no joke. And being able to maintain a lifestyle where, like you said, you're taking clients out for dinner, and of course there is alcohol there because that's just part of it, right? And that, I mean, for me, I would think that monkey is constantly scratching.
You would, my first 2 years, the hardest time to be sober actually for me was the first 2 years when I stopped drinking the second time, because it was a lot harder and I didn't go out and do anything. So it's not like I was out and about with people. I mean, this didn't really, even me going out with people didn't even really start until like 2015, 2016. And by that time I was 5 years out. And there's a couple things I would say. The first is everybody is different. Everybody has their own bottom, if you will. Um, Everybody has different support levels. Some families, I've talked to people whose families don't support them being going to meetings and not drinking. They think it's hogwash. I have brothers, I have very close friends, and I have parents who have all pretty much loved me unconditionally and supported me. I mean, I even have one friend. I don't want to name the friend, but he'll know who he is if he ever listens to this. I mean, at a wedding one time, somebody who I don't know, I was like, "Oh, come on, just have one." And my buddy kind of got in his face and was like, "You don't understand, man. Like, I know you think you might understand, but you can't do that." And I appreciate that kind of support. And my family for the longest time would, if are we allowed to, would be okay if anybody has a glass of wine at, Thanksgiving, or, and I'm like, guys, it's not. And I think the most important thing for somebody who has an issue is to remember, don't go around it right away. That's not good. Um, if you feel comfortable where you are, let others know around you that some days you're going to have good days where it's not going to bother you. Other days you're going to have days where it's, you're itching a little bit and it's, man, that smells good. That looks really good. But honestly, Doug, I've gotten to a place in my life where I look at my life as a whole. And Whitney and I, my wife, talk about this a lot. And I've talked about this with my parents too. I have so many things in life, um, despite the challenges I've had, um, that, like, my wife has never seen me drink. I have a job. Nobody that I work with has ever seen me drink. I didn't drink and I managed to get a PhD. I mean, if I could get a PhD, that should be the signal to all of your future students that if they want to get a PhD, all it takes is hard work and determination, and don't give up. Um, but everybody's different, and I used to go to meetings for a very, very long time. I'm not a regular anymore. But I just realized that everything I have, if I ever consciously made the decision to drink again, then that's on me for whatever happens. But my job, is it worth having a drink to give up my job, my wife, um, you know, what the material things that I have in life. I mean, that's not everything, but, and just honestly, more importantly than the material things, the contentedness I have that I can be me, and people like me. Well, not everybody, but people like me for me. and the fact that people can sit there and say, "Oh, come on, he was out having a good time with us," that just shows you that drinking, the people that like to drink and think it's important that they're drinking, you find out most people don't even notice, because if they're drinking, they don't care. All they want you to do is be present. So I don't know if that answered your
Yeah,
question,
no,
but
absolutely. I just have one last on this topic. I have one last question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. In our society today, addiction and recovery still has this, in my opinion, still has a very negative face. And
yes, it's getting better, but it
it
is still
it is. I
negative.
mean,
Yes.
what do you? So you said it's getting better. Do you see that in the future for it is becoming better for those people that need that help? Are the resources out there? I mean, looking back on it now, of course, you went through all this a couple of years ago, but you do know people that are in the community doing work today.
Yep.
What's the current state of all of this part of our social experiment of our society right now?
Well, I think universities, Penn State and Texas A&M would be two to name, that have gotten a lot more serious, recognizing that that this a lot of times manifests itself, at least the onset of behavior and the early um, uh, what do you call it?
Like warning signs or
The
whatever?
early warning signs, early path, early behavior that is becoming regular behavior, that is pretty characteristic. Um, but there is a stigma, and I would lie to you if I didn't tell you that a little ounce of me, even though I think most people I work with wouldn't listen to this and say, "Oh, I didn't realize that Brian went to AA meeting." It's like, it's kind of like oh my god. I mean, I think you have to look at it like any other medical condition, right? If you're diabetic, you know, you don't like not go get insulin because you're diabetic, or you don't check your blood, sugar because you're diabetic, because you're worried what people are going to think. It is human nature for us to look at another human being who does something a little different, or who does something that is quote unquote, and unfortunately with addictive behavior, it's, well, that person just lacks self-control, and I think it's the big stigma. And I don't think there's probably, Wilson did a decent job. Now I'm going back to the like around the early like 2000, 2001, 2002. They did a fairly decent job of letting us all know about that kind of stuff, but I just don't think most schools can afford the mental health resources that they really need, not even only for addiction, but behavioral issues. And I hate to say that, in a way, I feel like in our society, in a way, and I don't want to get myself into trouble here, but it's almost sometimes like the inmates are running the asylum, and we don't want to confront anybody about, hey, your behavior is unacceptable for a 21-year-old. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to tell. And I got to be careful, because Whitney and I don't have kids, so I can't sit there and say, oh, your kid's behaving badly, because I'm not a parent myself. But we've lost the old teachers, and I'm going to side with you here, Doug. Teachers, in the old days, used to, my mom used to tell me, and my dad, if you got in trouble at school, you were more worried about what your parents were going to do when you got home if the teacher called. And now it's almost like the other way around. And I think that there is a lot of mental health issues get missed because of the way our society has kind of flipped over like that. And I'm not saying we got to go back to nuns smacking kids with rulers. I'm not advocating for that, but I just don't think there's the resources for people to pick up on it. And even if they did pick up on it, I'm not sure a lot of parents and students would be very receptive of the fact that their child might have an issue. Um, and I don't know if the consequences are in place necessarily to kick people in the butt enough to know that that's what's going on. So
Do you think moving forward, as this has gotten more and more attention, especially like alcohol at university campus, thing like that you mentioned already, do you think that's going to continue? I think it is. I mean, we've seen a lot of the old stigmas of a lot of these things, whether it's addiction or learning disabilities, or I mean, with the rise of other learning problems and psychological issues with people, I see those walls starting to maybe not crumble down, but at least shift a little bit. But I'll be the first to tell you, I think there is that stigma still exists, especially with like
Oh yeah, for sure.
AA or any kind of like recovery. I mean, I just think I think that's still out there, and I think that's going to be a tougher battle to fight to really like throw the cover off of that and say, look, this is an important part of our society. It's making people better, making them more productive citizens. It's improving their lives, which in turn improves everybody's well being. So I'm hoping that that will continue. I mean,
Well, there's a stigma no matter what you do. Like I said, if it's not the norm, I would tell anybody who ever came to me, and I've talked to a lot of honestly, friends and family friends, sometimes much more than me in age, about, hey, when did you feel like you couldn't control it? When did you. And I just tell them, go to AA meetings. It worked for me. Um, you know, it's worked for a lot of people. Um, there's a stigma about it, but in one way, what is normal? I mean, you can get down to the nuts and bolts of it, and we all have our quirks. We all have our little things. I mean, it's not like I'm the first person ever that found out that they had an alcohol problem in college. There were many more before me. There will be many more after me. And I think sometimes, and what helped me actually, and this is a little bit of the program, but being comfortable with who you are. And it took me a long time in going to meetings to actually just say, you know what, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm Brian. I've had, my troubles with alcohol. And if people have a problem with that, then that's on them. And I'm happier not drinking. And the prophecy my mother laid out years ago that I thought was crap played out. And I can pretty much do anything I want. And so if it needs a little stigma because I'm not quote unquote normal, then Doug, I'm getting old enough. I mean, I'm not old, but I'm getting old enough that I don't give a damn anymore. Let's be honest. You can edit that swear word out. Sorry about
No,
that,
we'll
but
leave that one in because it's true. I mean,
but
that alone.
it's
But
very hard when you're young though to
oh
say like,
no,
oh my god, I'm
absolutely.
not drinking. It's
Yeah,
very
but
devastating.
I would also say that even take the whole alcohol aspect out of it. That concept and that philosophy of being happy who you are in your skin, in your own skin, is a lesson for everybody. I mean, that's the majority of your teenage years is struggling to, struggling with that concept. So, I mean, it's great advice. It absolutely is. And I'm glad you were able to beat the demon and come out the other side. And I mean, I've only known you post sobriety. I didn't know
Yeah,
Brian before that.
you're a
So I
lucky
mean,
dog.
yeah, okay, well,
You might
maybe
not like me too
maybe
much
we wouldn't have this
sometimes.
conversation right now, right?
I would be on your podcast. But no, I would tell any of your listeners, even if they think, I mean, yes, sometimes AA meetings may, from the external side, seem a little, hunky dory, kind of whatever. But it was the place I needed to go. I don't attend stuff regularly anymore, but I've gotten to a place. I mean, I told myself I didn't want to go get sober to live in a meeting for the rest of my life. And it didn't take 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It was more than that. But I got to a point where I was okay. But if you are listening to this and you're saying, I know that feeling that I can't stop the next one from happening. And I told my mom I wouldn't tell any horror stories on here, so I won't go into any more than that kind of part. But if you if you feel like that, if you feel like, man, my life is just I'm not who I want to be. You can't look yourself in the mirror without saying, what the hell am I doing to myself? Go to a meeting or go to a couple meetings. Commit to that. And if you feel like, man, these people kind of get me, then maybe it's a place for you. If it's not, there are other ways. I've had other family members and friends who just said, you know what, one day I'm done. I can't do this anymore. It's affecting my work. It's affecting my family. Um, and they did that, and that's okay. What worked for me was going to meetings, but whatever it is, if you feel like alcohol or whatever drug it is affecting your life, or even if you have a mental health issue that's affecting your life, because therapy is another one that people, it's another stigma. It's like, oh, well,
Oh,
this
sure.
person's not strong enough to deal with themselves. Go talk to I mean, you're talking to somebody who's going to independently tell you if what you're worried about, if what you're dealing with is something that's out of the norm, and maybe you need to work on that, or uh, maybe you're right there with it. And actually, early on in our marriage, I'll stop here, but Whitney would occasionally go to meetings with me, and Whitney has no issues with any of that. And she would sit there and she would say, "My God," she's like, "I don't know why more spouses don't come to these meetings." And I'm like, "Well, dear, the point is kind of just for people to go there anonymously." And she's like, "I know, but she said, all the stuff people says, a lot of it's just life lessons. It's how to live life the right way, being accountable, respecting other people, um, keeping your side of the train tracks clean, right?" And well, we could go in a lot of ways with that one, with the way society is now. But anyway, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
That's a perfect transition, Brian. I thank you for sharing your story because a lot of people, I mean, the stigma thing is so strong and so powerful that there are a lot
It
of people that
is.
never
It
even want
is.
to ask about it, talk about it, and I find that ridiculous, but I also understand why it is there. But I end every episode the same way, Brian, with 10 quick questions to my guests that have nothing to do
Okay.
with anything we've talked about so far. So are you
All right.
ready, my friend? Here we go. Drink
I don't
number
know.
one. Yeah, I know you got this.
Drink
No,
number one.
no, question number one. Holy
Oh,
cow. Maybe I did I say well
you.
the question when you hear the question you'll know why I did that. Oh my gosh. Question number one. What's your morning drink of choice?
Well, it's no longer Budweiser, or some hard liquor that I would sneak, but it's coffee. I drink
Yeah.
about a pot of coffee a morning. I love coffee.
So do I. How do you take your coffee?
Black. Don't
Black.
do anything to it. Unadulterated.
Unadulterated.
Doug, I know this is supposed to be a quick segment, but what
Yeah,
annoys me the most about life now, because with my research and development job, I'm on the road a lot, and I wake up and you just want a nice cup of coffee to get going.
sure.
And I walk into Starbucks, and it takes me 15 minutes. They should have a line just for the people that like black coffee, because it takes me 15 minutes to get up there. And I kind of stopped going because of this. And then I would order a black coffee, and they look at you and, no 5 pumps of this,
Yeah,
and
right. No, I hear you. I hear you.
it's just motor oil. That's what I like
That's
doing.
what you
So
like. All right. Question number two. Who is a go-to musical artist or group for you?
mm, it depends on the day. I can do anything from listening to Luke Combs, Florida Georgia Line, to Johnny Cash, to loving Tchaikovsky's Serenade for Strings, or Brahms, or any of the other stuff. So it really depends on the day, the time of year. Um, but I typically I like to listen to country,
Okay.
but I do
Old.
love classical music too.
Okay, good. Number three, what movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Hmm. Do I have to answer one?
You can give me two. Two of your favorites.
Goodfellas,
Okay.
Shawshank Redemption.
Uh, that answer gets given a lot. Shawshank Redemption. Goodfellas has been given two before, so yeah, good choices. Number four. What's the last thing that you read?
Um,
And it could be work related too. I mean, what's the last thing you read?
that's bad that I don't have a quick answer. Probably, you mean I'm not a big book reader,
Okay.
but I like to read a lot up on investing.
Okay.
Um, so I read a lot of shorter investing articles, and then peer review journal articles, or just general articles that come out in my industry, even if they're kind of white papers, or just 1 or 2 page quick hits on new things that are coming, new trends,
Does your
things like
job
that.
does your job require a lot of reading? I mean, when you step back and think about it.
Not a whole lot, because you kind of, with my job, I interact so much with university partners and their graduate students, and then I go to a lot of the meetings, the scientific society meetings for my industry,
So they do
that
all
I
the reading
usually
for you.
I kind of know what everybody's up on, what their research is, what they're doing, and if I need to go find something supplementary, I mean, I have access to all the journals that are important, and I'll glance through them every month. And if I find one I want to read up on that's new, I will. But a lot of times I let them do the heavy lifting and explain to me what they're working on, why they're working on it, who
Yeah.
did some of the preliminary work, and that
Yeah.
helps with that. So
Okay. Number 5, what's your favorite pizza topping?
pepperoni,
Okay. 6, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
laying on the beach. I'm
Oh,
not an exercise guy, Doug. You know that. Come on.
yeah, but so you don't mind the sand and you like that? I mean, are you a beach bum? Would you consider yourself that?
I'm not a beach bum. I'm a bum in general. But I like laying on the beach and getting some sun, and the beach is kind of my happy place. I can sit there on the beach and just fall asleep.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Number 7, you have invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Uh Man, you have tough questions, Doug. I could make you a lot of things. I could make you homemade burgers. I could make you a butter chicken. My claim to fame with my butter chicken is one of my really good friends from graduate school is from India, and I told her I was going to make her butter chicken one night. She's like, Brian. She calls me her baya. She's like, my baya, your butter chickens. Yeah. And she came over and ate it. She's like, this is really really good butter chicken. So I can cook a good steak. I can make good chicken piccata. You name it. I like to cook.
Well, you surprise me. I'll just show up and then whatever you make, we'll eat
Well,
because
but
I
for
eat
you, it's pork.
everything.
I'm going to make you pork and salad
Oh,
tonight.
okay. All right. Everybody always wants to make me Pennsylvania Dutch food, and I mean, I love it.
You're
Don't get me
like, I
wrong,
just
but
want the regular. I want
I
other
want,
food, man.
yeah, give me something else. No, it's good. But I like butter chicken though, so I'll have to try that sometime. All right, number
I
8.
will make it for you. I
Sounds
promise.
good, my brother. What's a dream vacation destination?
Dream vacation destination. I'm going to give you two again because I don't like these questions. You're too restrictive on what I can do. I would love to go see the beaches of Normandy
Hmm.
and then travel down through Germany. Those are two countries I've not been to. France and Germany. I guess I was in Germany for like 10 minutes one time. But then also maybe go to like the Maldives or Bora Bora,
I was
just
gonna
some
say for the
totally
your beach addiction there would be fulfilled, I would
just
think.
well, I mean, I guess not unfortunately, but I've been blessed, and Whitney and I've been blessed, with having pretty good jobs, and um, we've been able to travel to a few places already that are bucket list places.
Oh,
But
good.
yeah, some place way off the grid would be cool.
Yeah. All right, number 9. What is something you're afraid of?
Something I'm afraid of: spiders.
Okay. Okay. All right, last question. What job, other than one that you've had, would you love to have?
Pilot.
Oh, like a commercial pilot?
Yeah,
Oh,
I enjoy flying, which is good because my job results in me getting stuck in airports and being on delayed flights and not coming home when I'm supposed to be home on planes. But I love the feeling of taking off and flying and landing, and yeah, that would probably be it.
that's awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for sitting down and taking some time out of your busy schedule to do this with
You
me.
got it, Doug.
Your story is important to tell, and I'm glad that you were willing to do that. And hopefully, even
Of
if only
course.
one person hears it and makes a good decision about moving forward, then we've done our job, I think, in that
Hey,
point.
that's and you know what? Even if it's not one person that hears it, even if somebody hears it and they notice their kid in college has turned into a rebel without a cause, like
Yeah.
I was, then maybe they know what to tell them and that they're not alone. So
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Brian. I look forward to talking to you in the near future again, and thanks for coming up on the front porch.
anytime, my brother.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.